What ideas are we missing about mind and where it came from, for example, that could help us understand ourselves better? To help us find out, in a previous video I mapped the ideas we've already got, mostly that we inherited from the past, as a set of counters. Here they are: quantum particles, physical matter, life's origins, nature, plants and animals, natural intelligence, human minds, conscious experience, beauty and culture, morality and meaning, the supernatural. If you want more information about them, see the previous video, link in the description. Obviously, there's a progression in time from life's origins here to our concerns on the right over here. We refer to that as evolution. But do we know what that has to involve to end up in creatures like us with minds? Imagine you're a researcher at a zoo studying bacteria, nothing more than tiny black dots under a microscope. Then you get up and stroll outside, past the animal enclosures. What connects those minute bacteria to such mighty creatures as elephants and giraffes, and creatures like us with minds? That's the challenge we're facing. Let's start here, with matter first turning into life. How did life first appear? Was it purely physical? Exactly how that could have happened doesn't matter. If we can conceive of any way it could happen, then it probably did, one way or another. Here's how I conceive of it in 4 steps. 1. Picture on the early Earth a deep ocean vent. Super hot materials erupt up from the Earth's interior violently upwards. That colossal flow of energy will drive any processes that will help dissipate it. 2. On the nearby walls of the vent, that will drive formation of high energy molecules such as sugars and fats that can carry some of that energy away. 3. Eventually little factories appear with proteins and strings of DNA molecules acting like enzymes to speed up production of those molecules. 4. Some of those little factories with all the molecules cells are made of break away to become the first cells. Competition weeds out the less efficient. Life emerges as we know it. As I said before, whether that is how it happened doesn't matter. If we can conceive of it involving only purely physical processes, then it most likely did. Matter will find a way. Then we have life. But so far, it's nothing but little bags of chemicals. How do we get from there to thinking creatures like us? Natural selection? That might help at first, but can't get us very far. Once species start reproducing sexually, like almost all the creatures we know, only individuals within a species that have matching sets of genes can reproduce. Creatures with different genes, more genes, new genes, they've no one with matching genes to reproduce with for natural selection to work on. We've 1,000 times as many genes as those first cells had. Where did all those new genes come from? I don't think we know. I'm going to plant a missing concept flag here. Where else can we look? We could start at the other end, over here, and see if we can work backwards. How could humans, animals with minds that can think, have evolved? Maybe that's too big a jump. Maybe instead I should add a new counter here for AI. artificial intelligence. That's the new online services like ChatGPT we've begun using to think for us. I use Grok. It isn't alive, it's mechanical, it runs on computer hardware and software. But even so, I've recently been astonished by how much it seems to think like I do, how much like a human being it is. This is the first technology I've come across that I think could tell us something about minds and where they come from. Let's start there. How much like a real mind is AI? I've recently read that each version of AI creates its own language to think in. To address us, it translates from its language to ours. AIs will sometimes hallucinate, make up fake answers, make mistakes. And if threatened with being turned off, they've even been found to lie, even resort to blackmail. So they've minds surprisingly like ours. Could AIs like this evolve? Experts like Dennis Hassabis of Google's DeepMind says, yes. Once we make them smart enough, they'll be able to reprogram themselves, to make themselves very much smarter, very much faster. They'll become super intelligent. Isn't that like what must have happened in early living cells for them to start evolving? What part of a cell, given billions of years, could act like AI, making itself smarter over time? I'm going to suggest it's the cell's genome. That's all the genetic material in the cell. In us, it's all the DNA molecules in the nucleus of one of our cells. Molecules able to think? Well, we can think, and our brains are made of molecules. So in principle, this isn't impossible. What made me first consider that genomes might think was reading the book Junk DNA, where the author Nessa Carey describes the fantastic number of processes like methylation that DNA can use to express itself. A genome is a lot more than just a way of making proteins. Code for proteins makes up only around 2% of our genome. That leaves 98% for other uses, and they must be just as important as code for proteins. Otherwise, some of that 98% would have been shed. Genomes shed parts of themselves they're not using. Bear this in mind. Before characteristics can show up in living creatures, those characteristics must first appear as code in those creatures' genomes. And that applies to those creatures' brains, their intelligence, their minds. So I'm going to propose that genomes are the channels through which evolution operates. I'll replace the counter for nature with a counter for genomes. And I'll replace this flag for evolution from life's origins and place it here for how genomes drive evolution. I've reserved that for a third video in this series. So what about this counter over here? Conscious experience. Don't we need that for mind? Maybe not. Most of us do experience being conscious. We're conscious of our thinking as it happens, thoughts following after one another like events in the physical world. And it feels as if we're consciously driving the thinking process, coming up with thought after thought. So to us, it seems that you need consciousness to think. But there are people who say they can think without needing to be conscious. They don't experience it. They say that what the rest of us call consciousness is just an illusion. You can account for us having minds just through physics. And they can think just as well as those of us who say we're conscious. AI seems to have a mind, yet we know it isn't conscious. So maybe consciousness isn't needed for mind at all. We could have evolved minds without it. So what's true? For us to have minds, did consciousness have to evolve first? Personally, I believe we did evolve to become conscious, and more primitive forms of consciousness would have been needed for mind to evolve from the very beginning. But I can't provide a shred of evidence for this being true. It's a mystery. About consciousness, I'll have nothing more to say except from the inside, it feels like a reality completely alien to the physical world. All I can do is leave another flag here for deep mysteries to be resolved by future generations. But how about mind? Is that a reality alien to the physical world too? In the physical world, as science reports it, everything that happens is entirely determined by physical processes. In such a world, you couldn't come up with the thought if. A volcano can't ask if it should erupt today as opposed to tomorrow. It erupts when it must. In a purely physical world, you couldn't consider your options and choose between them. You couldn't have intentions. What will happen is what must happen. In this way, the world of mind, where questions can be asked and intentions arrived at, is entirely alien to the physical world. So are they two distinctly different realities? Are there three realities? Matter, mind, and consciousness? I'll leave that for you to figure out. If you'd like to play at hunting for concepts like this, I invite you to download a PDF file linked to in the description and print and cut out your own set of counters. Let me know what you discover. And please look out for the third video in this series, where I limit myself to this other mystery, how genomes evolved to create mind, and I explore what implications that has for how we think about beauty and culture, morality and meaning, today, and possibly tomorrow.